He came for the lunch special, steak, medium rare. He got a note on a folded napkin instead. 5 words that turned a quiet meal into an investigation that would shake the walls of his own restaurant. Because the man at table 7 wasn't just a paying customer, he was the silent owner who built this place from scratch. And what his waitress risked to tell him? It wasn't just about bad tips or rude customers, it was about a betrayal rotting the place from the inside. This is Hopeful Horizon. Before we begin, drop a comment with where you're watching from, and subscribe for more real stories that prove one brave voice can change everything. The bell above the door chimed softly as Marcus Hayes stepped into Hayes' steakhouse on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. He pulled his baseball cap low over his eyes and chose a corner table in the back. Table 7, ironically his lucky number, when he'd first opened this place 12 years ago. The restaurant looked exactly as he'd left it 3 months earlier when he'd moved to oversee his expansion into the next county. Red brick walls, vintage photographs of the town's history, the smell of grilled meat and fresh bread that had made this place a local institution. But something felt different. The energy was wrong, tense, muted, like everyone was walking on eggshells. Marcus had dressed carefully for this visit. No expensive suit, no flashy watch, nothing that would identify him as the owner. Just well-worn jeans, a plain t-shirt, and work boots that had seen better days. He wanted to see his restaurant the way his customers did to understand why the monthly reports had shown declining profits despite steady customer flow. He'd built this place from nothing, started as a short-order cook in his 20s, saved every penny, borrowed against his house to make the down payment. Hayes' Steakhouse wasn't just a business to him. It was his legacy, his contribution to the community that had raised him. A young waitress with tired eyes approached his table. Her name tag read Emily, and she looked like she hadn't slept well in weeks. Her uniform was clean but wrinkled, her smile forced but professional. "Welcome to Hayes' Steakhouse," she said, setting down a water glass with slightly trembling hands. "Can I start you off with something to drink?" Marcus studied her face, the way she glanced nervously toward the kitchen, the tension in her shoulders. "Just water's fine for now. I'll take a look at the menu." As Emily walked away, Marcus noticed how she moved, quickly, efficiently, but with the kind of hypervigilance that came from working in a hostile environment. He'd seen it before in other restaurants, usually right before they failed. Marcus kept his head down, pretending to study the menu while his ears picked up fragments of conversation from the kitchen and service area. What he heard made his blood run cold. "Short on the register again," one server whispered to another near the coffee station. "Third time this week." "Don't let Todd hear you talking about it," came the hushed reply. "You know what happened to Jessica when she asked questions." Marcus's jaw tightened. Todd Mitchell, the manager he'd hired 6 months ago with glowing references and an impressive resume. The man who'd promised to increase efficiency and boost profits while Marcus focused on expansion. From his vantage point, Marcus could see directly into the service area where Todd held court like a king. He was a tall man with slicked back hair and the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. Marcus watched as Todd intercepted a cash payment from a table of construction workers, pocketing several bills before recording a smaller amount in the register. "That's my side bonus," Todd chuckled to another server, loud enough for Marcus to hear. "Boss man's not here to count every penny, right?" Marcus's hands clenched into fists under the table. This wasn't just theft. It was a betrayal of everything he'd built. But he forced himself to stay calm, to gather information before acting. Emily returned to take his order, her movements even more nervous than before. Marcus noticed a small bruise on her wrist that she tried to hide with her sleeve. "I'll have the lunch special," Marcus said quietly. "Steak, medium rare." "Good choice," Emily replied, but her voice was hollow. "It might take a little while. We're a bit short-staffed today." As she walked away, Marcus saw Todd grab her arm roughly, pulling her aside for a whispered conversation that made her face go pale. Whatever he was saying, it wasn't friendly guidance. 20 minutes later, Emily returned with his steak. The meat looked good, but Marcus barely noticed. He was focused on Emily's face, which had gone from nervous to terrified. She set the plate down carefully, then leaned in slightly, pretending to adjust his napkin. "Is everything okay with your meal, sir?" she asked, but her eyes were saying something entirely different. That's when Marcus felt it. A small piece of paper pressed into his hand, along with a folded napkin. Emily's eyes met his for just a moment, and he saw desperation there, mixed with a desperate hope. "Please read this," she whispered, so quietly he almost missed it. "Careful." Emily walked away without looking back, but Marcus noticed her hands shaking as she cleared a nearby table. He kept the folded napkin in his lap, waiting until Todd was distracted before carefully opening it. The handwriting was small, hurried, desperate. "He's stealing. Threatens us if we talk. Camera's fake. Help us." Marcus felt his heart hammering in his chest. He looked up to find Emily watching him from across the room, her face a mask of professional calm that couldn't hide the fear in her eyes. He gave her the slightest nod, a signal that he'd received her message. But Emily wasn't finished. As Marcus continued eating, trying to appear normal, she made several more trips to his table, refilling his water, asking about his meal, each time passing along whispered fragments of information. "He fired 3 people last month for attitude problems," she murmured, while pretending to wipe down his table. "Anyone who questions the missing money." "The tip jar disappears at the end of every shift," she added during another pass. "He says it's company policy now." Marcus realized Emily wasn't just asking for help. She was conducting her own investigation, documenting the theft and abuse that had been happening under his nose. This young woman was risking her job, possibly her safety, to save a restaurant that meant everything to him. Marcus left a generous tip in cash, making sure Emily saw it, then walked out of the restaurant like any other satisfied customer. But his mind was racing with plans for justice. That night, he drove to his old apartment above the restaurant, the one he'd kept for sentimental reasons but rarely used anymore. From there, he had access to something Todd didn't know about, a secondary security system Marcus had installed before leaving town. The cameras Todd had been telling staff were fake were actually very real, hidden in locations only Marcus knew about. As he scrolled through hours of footage on his laptop, Marcus felt his anger building to a dangerous level. There it was, clear as day. Todd skimming cash from multiple tables, intimidating staff members, even eating food from the kitchen without paying. But worse than the theft was the way he treated the employees, the threats, the verbal abuse, the systematic culture of fear he'd created. Marcus watched Emily on the screen, saw how she flinched when Todd raised his voice, how she worked double shifts to make up for the staff he'd fired. He saw other servers counting their tips, only to find money missing, saw Todd's smug smile as he pocketed their hard-earned wages. By 3 a.m., Marcus had compiled a comprehensive file of evidence. He called his lawyer, then his accountant, then the detective who'd handled security for the restaurant's grand opening. By dawn, he had a plan. But first, he needed to warn Emily. He couldn't let her suffer for being brave enough to speak up. The next day, Marcus Hayes walked into his restaurant at exactly 12:30 p.m., peak lunch rush, maximum witnesses. This time, he wasn't hiding. He wore a crisp white shirt, dark jeans, and the confidence of a man who'd built something from nothing and wasn't about to let anyone tear it down. The reaction was immediate. Servers who'd worked there before his expansion did double takes, whispering excitedly to their colleagues. Emily dropped a water glass, her face cycling through shock, relief, and terror in rapid succession. But Todd Mitchell was nowhere to be seen. Marcus found him in the office, feet up on the desk, counting a stack of cash that definitely wasn't going into the register. Todd looked up with his usual arrogant smile, which quickly faded when he realized who was standing in his doorway. "Mr. Hayes," Todd stammered, quickly shoving the money into a drawer. "I wasn't expecting you back so soon." "I bet you weren't," Marcus replied, his voice dangerously quiet. "Staff meeting. Now, everyone." Marcus walked into the dining room where his employees had gathered, their faces showing a mixture of excitement and fear. Emily stood near the back, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus began, his voice carrying easily through the room, "I want to thank you all for your hard work and dedication, but I also want to address some serious issues that have come to my attention." He pulled out his phone, connected it to the restaurant's display screen, and began showing the security footage. The room fell silent as they watched Todd's crimes play out in high definition. "This is what theft looks like," Marcus said calmly. "This is what happens when someone mistakes trust for weakness." Todd tried to interrupt, his face red with panic and anger. "You can't just—" "I can." Marcus cut him off. "It's my restaurant, and you're done here." But Todd wasn't finished. In a desperate move that revealed his true character, he pointed an accusing finger at Emily. "She's the one who's been stealing," he shouted. "She's been skimming tips and—" "That's enough," Marcus said, stepping between Todd and Emily. "You're done stealing from my family. You're done threatening my staff. You're done." The police arrived minutes later. Marcus had called them before entering the restaurant. As they escorted Todd out in handcuffs, his final words were threats directed at Emily, confirming everything she'd risked to tell Marcus. When the chaos settled, Marcus found Emily in the break room, crying with relief and exhaustion. "You saved this place," he told her gently. "You saved all of us." He promoted her to shift supervisor on the spot, with a raise that more than doubled her previous salary. But more importantly, he made sure every employee knew that speaking up about problems wasn't just welcomed, it was essential. Marcus Hayes didn't sit down at table 7 looking for a hero. He found one anyway. Emily risked everything for the truth, and in return, she got more than a new title. She got a boss who actually cared. This isn't just about a steakhouse, it's about what happens when the silent good finally speaks up against the loud wrong. If this story gave you hope, drop a comment with where you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe to Hopeful Horizon for more stories that peel back the silence and prove courage has no uniform. Until next time, stay sharp, stay honest, and never be afraid to slip someone the note that saves it all. This is Hopeful Horizon, signing off.